From completely different pre-fight testing requirements for athletes in one championship to the UFC abandoning the original tournament-based format for fighting organizations, MMA organizations have gotten pretty diverse over the years. Let's check some of those differences out and see which promotion does it the best. The UFC definitely has the best fighters. We'll get into a lot of the finer details in a bit, but we have to establish simple superiority for the UFC. If you want to be the best fighter in the world at any weight class, the UFC is the place to earn those chops. We've seen time and again in history that fighters claw to the top of whatever organization they started out in, even become champions, just so they can transition to the UFC and compete against the best in the world. And often, we see those champions struggle to even break the top 10 for their weight division once they make the shift. Michael Chandler is one of the best fighters Bellator has ever produced, and fair play to him. He's one of the best lightweights in the UFC too, but he failed at the championship level, and I don't think he's going to get another shot anytime soon. On the other hand, fighters that the UFC often cuts ties with, like Benson Henderson, have gone to Bellator to become champions. So I think it's pretty safe to say that all MMA organizations on 6 continents act as seed groups for the UFC, while one championship can stand up to the UFC in fighter quality in Asia because of its connection to Muay Thai and kickboxing. One championship is the only competitor the UFC has for viewership. The quality of the fighters definitely matters because the best fights will eventually end up being the most viewed ones, and the UFC still takes the cake with around 115 million viewers worldwide. This puts the 26 million viewers Bellator, PFL, Rizin, KSW, and Glory have combined to shame. But Asia is the most populated continent on the planet, visible in the 54 million viewers one championship had in 2022. If we look at social media, then the gap is even closer, with the UFC getting 6 billion hits on YouTube, with one getting 3 billion. The Asian competitors take the lead in organic videos, scoring over 7 billion views, 3 billion more than the UFC, while all other organizations, including Bellator, don't even crack a billion in that category. Even in terms of investment, nobody comes close to the Ultimate Fighting Championship's $10 billion market cap. One is at $1.4 billion and growing quickly with new investors. But where the Asian promotion really shines is its television reach. Many countries in Asia aren't as tech-savvy as the West, and the bulk of their viewership comes from cable TV, a place where one reaches over 400 million people, while the UFC can barely cross 250 million, and Bellator's not even close with 11 million. But let's not give Bellator a tough time here, because they could genuinely be the most meritocratic organization out of all. Bellator, where title shots are earned, not given. That's the official slogan of the promotion, by the way. Something I'm sure is a dig at the UFC's questionable matchmaking. Like the inaugural days of the UFC, Bellator has consisted of tournament-based divisions that are conducted in seasons, lasting roughly 3 months. 8 fighters from each weight class compete for the #1 contender spot, with the winner fighting the champion. This setup is vastly different from the UFC. They still have rankings, and there is an implicit structure and hierarchy within each weight class. But the push for maximum viewership sometimes leads to popularity outweighing skill, leaving both fans and fighters longing for structure. It's tough to call it a better system overall, though. The results say it matters what the fans want because, at the end of the day, this is prize fighting. The best athletes will go where they are valued the most, making viewership really important for a division's competitive edge. The UFC may be the global leader in that department, but that could change pretty soon with one dominating Asia with its unique approach to fight promotion. One championship has a unique try-anything policy, while the UFC, Bellator, Cage Warriors, and most other promotions operate as mixed martial arts organizations in the traditional sense, meaning they have weight classes and rounds, but one puts on kickboxing fights and Muay Thai fights alongside their MMA organization. On some crazy occasions, times that are my absolute favorites, by the way, one will combine different sports together if the fans are curious. Remember the time they matched former UFC champion Mighty Mouse against the Muay Thai pride prodigy Rod Tang, the two would start with one round of stand-up, Rod Tang's domain, followed by one round of MMA, Johnson's forte, and so on. The idea was so creative and interesting that the fight became one of the most viewed events of the year. It's their willingness to step outside of the box that completely differentiates them from the UFC and most other organizations that try to mimic the UFC. But let's talk about weight divisions specifically, because that's where the two really stand on opposite hills. One Championship and UFC lightweights are incredibly different. 155 pounds is one of the most competitive divisions for mixed martial arts in all promotions across the world. So let's use it to show how different, and in my opinion better, One Championship is with enforcing the concept of weight class. In the UFC and Bellator, fighters are allowed to cut weight or dehydrate themselves to make the limit for their respective weight classes. Then they're given 24 hours to rehydrate. This is sanctioned cheating because on fight night, a lightweight can enter the ring anywhere from 155 to 200 pounds. It's also extremely dangerous for fighters who will go to extreme lengths to get a size advantage, and has led to the deaths of fighters in One Championship. That prompted the promotion to introduce hydration tests done right before the fight to make sure a fighter hasn't cut any weight. Innovative solutions to age-old problems in professional fighting, as well as a playful approach to traditional matchmaking, have put One Championship in the position to challenge the UFC. But the question remains, who does it best? Out of the entire roster of promotions like Cage Warriors, PFL, and Bellator, etc., it's clear the UFC and One Championship stand head and shoulders above the rest. But beyond that, I think it boils down to what matters more to you when you watch a fight. Competition-wise, I'd still give the UFC an edge, but the quality of fights in One is so good that you can't really go wrong with a pick here. Bellator has produced amazing fighters in all weight classes as well, athletes that have gone on to succeed in both the UFC and One Championship. There has to be a special mention here for the Ultimate Fighter and the Dana White Contender Series. To this day, I haven't seen a better platform for young talent to showcase their skills and get an opportunity at the highest level. If you like diversity in fighting styles and want all your combat sport needs under one roof, you're better off with One. Although it's fair to say the UFC puts on a better show than anybody, and they're the only promotion that produces global superstars in MMA. They may still cling to some outdated concepts like weight cutting and refuse to add more weight classes despite requests from fans and fighters alike. They still manage to attract the best talent. Well folks, those are all the major differences between three of the world's most famous MMA organizations.